My name is Katie O'Neill, and I'm the marketing manager here at the UCD College of Engineering and Architecture. Today, we're very lucky to be joined by a number of academics, a student and a recent graduate from the Architecture, Planning and Environmental Policy School here at UCD, to give you a run through on a number of the masters that we have available. So I would like to introduce our head of school, Professor Eoin O'Neill.
Hello, you're all very welcome to this webinar. I'm very pleased to introduce myself and then a couple of colleagues thereafter. I suppose the school is the School of Architecture, Planning and Environmental Policy. As the name suggests, there's multiple subjects within the school: architecture, environmental policy, landscape architecture, urban and regional planning, and also some cross-disciplinary groups as well, so urban design, which Arthur will talk about in a few minutes. So the school is located on the Richview campus, which is on the edge of the wider Belfield campus. It has a wide range of facilities and amenities. So for those of you in the urban design kind of and the architecture element, they're large studios that are purposeful for our programs, for the project kind of programs. We also have a dedicated library in Richview for architecture, planning, the built environment. There's a cafe, and as I mentioned, numerous studios. Within the school, we have a number of programs. I'm going to talk briefly about one of those and then hand you on to some colleagues. So I'm going to talk about the MSc in Environmental Policy. So it's delivered by one subject group within the school from a number of very research active faculty. The program itself comprises of two elements. So core knowledge in environmental policy, so issues like EU environmental policy, environmental economics, environment and behaviour, analysis of those various elements. And then modules that focus on core skills, so developing research capability, research applications in areas like climate policy, environmental law, environmental impact assessment, for example, although those topics may vary year on year depending on the focus. And then an application module called Tools for Sustainable Development, where you bring together the knowledge and those skills in a sort of integrated project in a studio, working with groups, working with other colleagues during the semester, the second semester. And apart from the individual modules, in terms of taught kind of modules, students also have an opportunity to undertake an individual thesis to pursue their own research interest on a topic of their choosing, working with supervisors from the faculty, or else to undertake an internship with an associated, whether it's an NGO, consulting, or in research. So it can be an internship external to the school or an internship sort of internal, working on a project with faculty. So there's a variety of elements potentially there. In terms of the skill set you might develop from undertaking the program, professional skills like communications, leadership, problem solving, report writing, policy dialogue, presentations, project management, all those skill sets would be developed through the various modules that you'd undertake. In terms of the types of applicants that we seek, or we're very happy to admit, it's typically upper class honours degree, so 2-1, excuse me, in social science and arts, environmental science, law, business, engineering, but we're very open to the types of applicants, so humanities as well, backgrounds in media, backgrounds in English literature. So we've had applicants from a wide range of areas. So every kind of skill set that people have is very applicable, because there's no single career pathway for someone who does the MSc in environmental policy. Many people go on to progress careers in consulting or in the private sector. So working in utilities, working in renewable energy, banking, consulting firms, public bodies like government departments or local authorities, NGOs, whether that's in waste, climate, biodiversity. We've had plenty of people get into those sectors, or to pursue their own research interests. Working as researchers in policy kind of consulting, or else pursuing PhDs. So we've had PhD or students who've gone on to pursue PhDs in UCD, in universities in Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium as well. So there's plenty of scope. The typical student profile is very international ordinarily. So we have applicants usually from throughout Europe and across the world. That may be slightly different this year depending on who ultimately travels, but the plan is, and I'm sure Katie will maybe talk about this a bit later, a blended learning model that will be likely pursued. So I think that'll be confirmed by Katie. I think that covers broadly the MSc Environmental Policy. As I mentioned, it's one subject within a school. The school has a wide range of faculty across the 4 subjects, and also what are called design fellows that assist with studios in the likes of urban design and the architecture associated programs. And a wide range of staff with lots of research interests across all those broad areas. So I know we're slightly pushed for time and there'll be time for questions. So I'm going to hand you over to Dr. Arthur Parkinson. He's Assistant Professor in Planning and Urban Design and Director of the MSc in Urban Design and Planning. He's a wide range of experience in that. He's a conservation architect himself, as well as having a PhD. So he's hugely experienced and an excellent director of that program. So I'll hand you over to Arthur.
Thanks very much, Owen, for that very generous introduction. I'm going to speak, focus primarily on the current MSc Urban Design and Planning program. It's a 1-year, 90-credit specialist program focused on urban design. And it is delivered by both the architecture and planning subject areas within the school. So students are exposed to a broad range of expertise within the school during their time studying as a result of the fact that it is delivered across the school like in that way. In terms of the types of applicants that we look for or that the program attracts, in particular we do get applications from students from planning backgrounds, architecture backgrounds and landscape architecture backgrounds. I would say though that applicants from other backgrounds, so for example surveying or engineering, are very welcome to apply as well. So those are people who work in an area which is closely related to planning and urban design. We do also consider applications from other areas, so for example geography, to give one example. But I would say if from those slightly more distant subject areas, we would be looking for those applicants to I suppose clearly demonstrate a commitment to pursuing a career in planning and a clear interest in urban design, and not just planning, but urban design in particular. In terms of the content of the program is, I suppose, divided into 3 categories of modules. Firstly, modules in urban design context and theory, which make up 30 credits of the program. And that's mostly delivered through lectures and seminars. And then secondly are the urban design studio modules, again 30 credits of those, allowing students to apply the knowledge from the theoretical modules within a very much a hands-on, practical, project-based learning environment, a collaborative environment as well, because there's a lot of group work within the studio modules. And thirdly then, there are also modules in research skills and the thesis as well. In relation to the thesis, I would say just that all students can choose, will do or can do a traditional written thesis, but if students are from an architectural background or a landscape architectural background, those students can also choose a design thesis, which is a mixed mode thesis. It's a shorter written document plus a design project, and it's very much a student-led research project. So it has a lot in common with the thesis, but I suppose it allows students from a design background to play to their design strengths when they're working on their thesis. And you can see the details of specific modules on the UCD website. I won't get into the details of them just now, but in the Q&A at the end, I can answer questions on specific modules if people do have questions on that. I want to say a little bit briefly about accreditation. The MSc Urban Design and Planning it offers specialist accreditation from the Royal Town Planning Institute. It's the UK's professional planning institute, but it also operates and is recognised in Ireland. The programme doesn't offer what's called spatial accreditation, and that I suppose just means that how you would progress to become a professional chartered planner after you graduate, it just takes a couple of extra years than it would if you had a combined accredited RTPI degree. Now, I know there's a lot of terminology I'm using here. You can read up on all the details of these different types of accreditation on the RTPI website. It's all set out very, very clearly in diagrams there. So if you're interested in accreditation, it's all set out very clearly on the website of the Royal Town Planning Institute. In terms of career, I would just say, I suppose that, you know, our graduates do go on to work in a range of different areas. I suppose similarly to the MSc Environmental Policy, to an extent that depends on the undergraduate degree that the student has. So all of our graduates can choose to go on to work as practicing practicing planners. So they can go on to work in the planning field. That would mainly be in private practice, but also working in local authorities. Some of our graduates have also gone to work, for example, in planning and urban design teams for private developers. And, you know, there can be opportunities, for example, to work in the civil society sector, you know, the Antashka, the National Trust for Ireland, or local civic trusts, or other similar organizations internationally. If you have a degree in architecture or landscape architecture, or indeed engineering, then it would be quite common for those graduates to go back to work in those disciplinary areas. So someone who has an undergraduate degree in architecture to go back into architectural practice, but with the added value, I suppose, of the specialist degree in urban design and planning. So working in architectural practice, but specializing in urban design. And the same would go for landscape architecture, you know, or someone from an engineering background going back to work in engineering, but with this specialist knowledge and understanding in urban design. I would just, I suppose, finally say one brief word about, not in the forthcoming academic year, but the subsequent academic year, we will be offering a new program, the MSc Planning, Development and Urban Design. That will be open only to qualified architects who wish to specialize in urban design and planning. That degree program, it's only 1 year in duration, but it offers both types of specialist and spatial accreditation from the RTPI. And within that program, there's a greater focus upon core spatial planning content than in the existing MSc Urban Design and Planning. So that's, I suppose, the key difference between those two plannings, two programs, excuse me, that the existing MSc Urban Design and Planning has a greater focus on urban design, and it's much more specialist in terms of focusing on urban design. So on that note, I suppose I'll just hand over now to Oliver, who is the Program Director of the MSc Architecture, Urbanism and Climate Action and Environment Program. Oliver.
Hi there, I'm Oliver Kinnane. I'm the Director of a new MSc in Architecture, Urbanism and Climate Action at University College Dublin. It kicks off this semester, or this September rather, for the first time. It's a new program. It responds to the climate crisis, which is unfortunately strongly correlated with the development and construction of our built environment. If I just...
You should be able to share your screen now.
Some slides. So it's, as I say, MSc in Architecture, Urbanism and Climate Action. You'll find details of the program online on the master's page on the UCD website. I'm the program director. And I suppose just to give a little bit of context as to why we're setting up this new program. I mean, today we live in a highly urbanized environment with over 230 billion meters squared of built floor area. And over the next 40 years, we plan to double that, or the projections are that we will double that built floor area to adding another 230 billion meters squared. And of course, in doing so, we will consume an awful lot of energy. I mean, just to put that level of development in context, if this is New York City, what will happen is we'll add essentially a whole New York City to the world every month for the next 40 years. So that's 4 times the amount of New York cities you're looking at on this page here. And in doing so, I mean, to operate the buildings that we have in existence at the moment, we're talking about 3 trillion kilograms of CO2 equivalent each year. If we look at that, take that all the way back to the power generation, to the point where we're producing the energy for buildings, we're talking almost 10 trillion kilograms of CO2 each year. And if we add the same amount of buildings again, we're looking at adding something like 570 or more trillion kilograms of CO2 to the atmosphere in just building and operating the buildings that we have. And the challenge here, or the real problem here, is that when we look at the research, they're looking about threshold levels of less than 500 trillion kilograms of CO2 for even just a 50% chance of avoiding a 1.5 degree increase in temperature. So you see that there's a real need to rapidly decarbonize the operation of built environments. We need to establish an urbanism that is sparing of energy and natural resources. We need to design and operate our buildings much more efficiently. We need to use and learn to use construction materials with low embodied carbon to retrofit, renovate, and reuse the buildings that we have in the first place, and to design for end of life, and to take action for climate, and to do that quickly. So, I mean, in this MSc in Architecture, Urbanism, Climate Change, we'll teach you how to do these things. You take subjects like architecture and climate change, carbon management and sustainable urbanism, urban design theory, renewable energy systems, climate policy and politics, air pollution, just to name a few of the options that are available. You will also do what we're calling a linked research project, which has 3 options available to you. So if it's 30 credits for core modules, 30 credits for the option modules, of which there's a long list across and modules available across the university. And then there's 30 credits for the research project, which we're calling a linked research project, which will either be placement with a linked employer who you identify, or working on an established research project, of which we have many within the School of Architecture, Planning and Environmental Policy, a number of prestigious European and national research projects. So you will join a research group working with data on those projects. Or else you can undertake an individual study in a research area of your choosing, with an identified supervisor. So I guess with regard to career options, well, I think there are many options. If you're coming from an architectural or construction background, many of the big practices today have sustainability experts within their practices. This master's, we think, would set you up perfectly for such a role, say working in a big practice like Grimshaw's or Norman Foster's practice, AECOM, or any of the big engineering practices, MRUP, Buro Happold, all have big sustainability, building performance, building analysis offices within their practices. Apart from that, there's opportunities within public organizations, government departments, NGOs, and we'll attempt to link you with a number of these through the master's program. So that's it in summary, and I'll answer any questions that people have specific to the program. Okay, thank you. I'll hand back to Arthur.
Thanks, Oliver. I'm just going to hand over now to Hugh Kelly, who is a current student on the MSc Urban Design and Planning, and also a graduate of our undergraduate degree program in planning here in UCD. So Hugh, over to you.
So well, first of all, it was quite a big course. It was quite a big change for me. It was there's about 23 people in my course, and many of them were architects. So it was I was kind of unsure whether I was going to fit in. However, there was disciplines. There was 2 engineering students, a geography student, a business student, and then the rest were architects and many different nationalities as well. So it was great to kind of get exposed to different cultures as well as the different disciplines. And the way the course was laid out it's very practical, a lot more practical than I kind of expected. But also with that theory as the background as well to support that practice, and very orientated around kind of drawing, getting your hands kind of dirty in terms of like staying away a bit from the certainly what the architects were used to in terms of like the software they're using, kind of going back towards just drawing and seeing what your mind creates and stuff like that. In terms of career, I haven't really kind of, because of coronavirus, there hasn't really been too much to kind of expand on too much. Alana might be able to kind of give more insight into that. Alan Mee kind of heads the studio side of it, and he's very kind of forward, kind of challenge you a lot. So it's quite an intense course in that aspect, but very fulfilling, and I'd highly recommend it to anybody of any discipline to come and go, because you certainly every student benefits from each other discipline, and you pick up so much different things. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, you.
I think, as you mentioned, Alana has graduated, so she has a couple of years out of the Masters, so it might be interesting to see her perspective now of having graduated from a Masters within the school, what career direction you've gone on, and also just to touch back on your experience with Masters as well.
Mm-hmm. I was a landscape architect by training, so that's what my undergraduate was in, and I worked for a couple of years. So I came back, as Arthur said, it really tied in well with my undergraduate doing urban design as a master's. And the reason I chose it was I wanted to kind of look at that intersection between the two. So it kind of, the degree is open for those, I'd say, who are generally interested. But if you're very interested in a specialized area too, you can really dig into it within the 1 year. Moving out of the master's, I went back into landscape architect, but it did set me up. I had worked in the United States prior to that. And after the master's, now I work in Ireland, and the master's did give me a relevant understanding of the planning system in Ireland, as well as a little bit of a working knowledge for working as a landscape architect doing big urban design projects in Ireland. So doing big SHD projects, and also just the integration between the fields too here. So in the degree, as Hugh said, I worked with architects, surveyors, geographers, and that kind of set me up for doing that again now outside in day-to-day meetings with architects and engineers. Yeah, trying to think what else I could say about working outside of that. I would recommend that, like, anyone who does the degree, it's great to have to look at just generally and try and think in the first couple months about what you're interested in. I think that helped a lot, is that I got to get a good understanding of general principles, and then I got to look at the transition between landscape and urban design and see kind of how those transition together throughout the year.
Thank you. We've actually had a few questions come in already. And just if anyone, I see a number of attendees there, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom if you want to pop some more in. So I know probably this is for both of our student and our graduate. I know you both did the same master's, which is the Urban Design and Planning, which for our attendees is major code W332. Someone just wondering, how intense are the weekly hours? And I guess it might be an idea to say in terms of maybe the contact hours, but in addition to contact hours, I guess that there's a number of hours you have to self-direct learning and study and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'll start. The studio works, so you've kind of like an undergraduate degree where, so we have 4 modules per trimester, and for 3 of them, you have 2 hours a week, if I remember. And then, but the studio module, which is a 15 credit module, will consist of about 12 to 13 hours a week. But on top of that, you're expected to do a lot more. You're expected to come in every single day during the week. Obviously, it's a very flexible course, so nobody's going to be kind of breathing down your neck to get kind of to be in on time or stuff like that. But you are expected to. But at the same time, from my experience, everyone was doing those hours. Everyone's putting the work, and at the same time, it's quite fun to do it as well. So it certainly wasn't a challenge. It was quite intense, but it certainly has the benefits in terms of the work, what I got out of it. So Alana might have a different view, but
no, I agree. I think it's hour in the class, hour out of the class, but also the professors, if you ask them, they will direct you how much time they think. I'd say that's also pretty reasonable, like not compared to design school in the States. It's, more reasonable expectations.
Okay, and someone just asking, is there a lot of group work with your peers?
If you want there to be group work, I know Alan was, so we'd have projects to do, and you could work as a group if you wanted to. Maybe not so much as a group, but in pairs. At the beginning of the course, there was a bit more group work to kind of get people to kind of interact with each other. But for the most part, you will be expected to work on your own and come up with your own design ideas and solutions. But there certainly is that aspect of group work, if you want there to be.
Okay, excellent. Alana, I don't know if you have anything to add into that?
Nope.
That covers it. Probably a question for Arthur here, actually. Someone's asking, what's the key difference between the MSc in Urban Design and Planning and a program I know we didn't really do an overview of today, which was the Masters of Regional and Urban Planning, which just for our attendees is a 2-year Masters, but I know Arthur will be able to highlight the key differences.
Sure. Well, the MRUP program is, because it's a 2-year program, that reflects the level of accreditation that it offers. So it as I mentioned briefly earlier, it would offer combined RTPI accreditation. It also offers IPI, full IPI accreditation. So it allows you to progress to become a fully qualified chartered planner more quickly. It has a much greater focus. This is the key difference. Much greater focus on core planning content, whereas W332, Urban Design Planning Program, is much more specialized. So if you choose the MRUP program, it's not that you won't study urban design. Indeed, I teach an urban design studio module on that program, but I suppose there's not quite as much of an emphasis on urban design within the MRUP. If you choose the urban design and planning, there's a lot of urban design emphasis within that program.
Thank you, Arthur. A couple of questions here for Oliver. In the MSc in Architecture, Urbanism and Climate Action, what roles and companies do you see graduates progressing to, and have you liaised with potential employers in terms of the course content?
As I said during the presentation, I guess the companies that we would see people progressing to are probably some of the big architectural and engineering practices. People in the architecture field, like as I was saying, Norman Foster's office, Grimshaw's, Richard Rogers' office. Many of those offices in the UK now have huge departments focused on sustainable architecture, sustainable urbanism. In the engineering field, MRUP, Borough Hapoldy in Dublin here have big offices focused on sustainable design, building performance, facade engineering. So all of those, AECOM is another company that would come to mind. All of those companies, I think, would be obvious places for graduates of this program to find career opportunities. Well, I mean, through the years of developing modules in facade engineering and building analysis, we've had links with MRUP and of course a number of architecture practices. Our school is primarily practice focused, and the architectural education is delivered by practicing architects. So all have had input into the modules and courses that we deliver. So yes is the answer to that question. It's been very practice and defined, I guess, the education that we deliver across undergraduate and master's programs. And yeah, we have been talking to be. We have a project ongoing with the Department of Foreign Affairs looking at their buildings, and we hope to offer opportunities, or we've discussed with the Department of Foreign Affairs for offering research opportunities related to that project. So people would do a sustainability plan maybe for one of the Foreign Affairs mission buildings around the world. We've had discussions with other bodies as well, but some of those partnerships are still in development.
Thank you, Oliver. And just while I have you there, someone's just asking, they come from an environmental sciences background and want to know, are they eligible to apply for the MSc in Architecture, Urbanism and Climate Action? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, an environmental science background is highly appropriate to what we'll be teaching, and a lot of what we will cover, I guess, will have you know, a foothold in environmental science, particularly on the climate science work that we cover. I mean, the student would want to be aware that there will be a focus on buildings and on architecture and on urbanism. So there will be some upskilling required, but the modules are delivered, you know, for people with, I guess, a broad range. Sorry, that's my smoke alarm going off in the background. So if you don't mind, I just might stick my head out. Okay, we're okay, I think. Yeah, the answer is yes. The student should consider applying for the program. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Just one for yourself, Eoin. Someone is just asking, in relation to the environmental policy, do your graduates, do you find that they mainly go into the private or the public sector for their career?
I would say it's quite mixed. I don't have a specific breakdown, but many of the students over the initial phase of when the program started, a lot of them went into the private sector, into consulting, into renewable energy. So there was a big focus on bringing about sort of wind energy and renewable sources of energy. So a lot of graduates went into that space. Quite a number have gone into NGOs. Perhaps less have gone into the public sector, but as the job opportunities in the public sector grew post the financial crisis, quite a number would have gone into government departments. Initially, some of them have secured internships and sort of got a foothold that way. Some of our international students got into other equivalent government departments and agencies as well. So I would say it's a bit of a blend across it all, rather than being a specific real focus on any one area. Really, I suppose that the nature of environmental policy is that there's not an individual career pathway. So like in planning, for example, a lot of people who pursue planning have a view about what a planner does and the specific types of locations they generally work with. With environmental policy, someone could pursue a communications career or a journalism career, or work in climate action, in policy making in government, or in an NGO and more activism. So it really depends on the specific interests of the individual and their motivation where they may want to pursue a career. And the public sector is definitely a viable option for many, but for lots of others, they want to pursue a different type of career pathway.
Thanks, Eoin. And just thank you to Laura for joining us. I have a couple of questions, Laura, if you don't mind. Someone asking, is it too late to apply for September 2020?
Yeah, so it's really nice to join you today. For anyone looking to still apply to our programs, they are currently all still open at the moment. I would advise applicants to get their applications in as soon as they can, just to be with the best chance of getting their applications reviewed and hopefully getting an offer to us. But they're all still open at the moment, and for anyone who wants to apply, it's just an online system, and they can go to ucd.ie/apply, or if they're on our graduate studies website, any of the prospective programs you're looking at will have a little tab at the bottom of those pages to apply as well.
Thanks, Laura. The same person is also asking, is it possible to continue working in a company while doing the master's program? they might just follow up and let us know which master's program you're interested in pursuing, and we could answer specifically. Just another question for you, Laura, if you don't mind. Is teaching expected to proceed as usual in the 2020 academic year?
Yeah, so obviously given the current circumstances, the next year might look a little bit different for the first trimester. So UCD is looking to start 2 weeks later than normal. So orientation week will now take place the week commencing September 14th, and then teaching term will start week commencing September 21st. And what that semester and trimester might look like for our students is, obviously I'd like to put a caveat that it is a fluid situation at the moment, so things may change between now and when we actually start, but at the moment we're working towards a blended learning experience. So what that means for students is things like bigger groups like lectures may have to continue doing an online learning experience, but other elements of modules like tutorials and labs and studio work will take place in person and on campus.
Thanks.
I have an extensive FAQ on the website as well, and I'll put a link to that for anyone who wants to check up there and keep up to date with the measurements that UCD is putting in place.
Thanks for that, Laura. Also, specifically, someone's asking, and this might be, Owen may feel comfortable answering this. I know the situation is still being worked out, but how will COVID affect the studio-based learning? I'm not sure if we have a full answer to that just yet.
I suppose the plan is, well, the plan is being currently worked on. So it's, as mentioned, it is somewhat fluid. But a lot of the conventional larger lecture classes will most likely have a stronger online element, but maybe with follow-up tutorials, workshops in person on campus. The studios, by their nature, perhaps more the foundation knowledge might be given in perhaps on an online, but there is a requirement to have an online focus or a face-to-face interaction on campus experience for a lot of the studios. So there's a lot of effort going into working on the timetabling and creating openings to make sure that we can deliver the studios whilst having social distancing and the necessary safety requirements to deliver those. So there's work going on in the background. The plan is that we would have an on-campus experience for the studio elements.
Thanks, Owen. And I think, as Laura mentioned, it's a very useful resource if you refer to the FAQs that UCD have posted up. Laura has the link to that on the Zoom webinar chat, and UCD is updating that on a very regular basis. This one will possibly for any of the academics, and this is our final question for the day. Do you have any insight on PhD opportunities in this school in UCD? And I suppose then the required qualifications or how to start an application for a PhD position.
I suppose the typical requirement is a 2:1 honours degree with a master's. Disciplinary background is not, it's usually you have a cognate disciplinary background, but it's not necessarily crucial depending on the specific topic. So there are usually funded opportunities that emerge somewhat ad hoc. Depends on which member of faculty has got research funding supporting a PhD program. So I, for example, have one at the moment in the bioeconomy. So we'd be looking for someone who had probably a social science background. So in environmental and policy and planning, typically we would look for people who have a social science or maybe environmental science background. For someone in architecture, typically we more construction, built environment, architecture background that would be sought, but not exclusively so. There's obviously a art, history, humanities element and theory element in architecture as well that would have a very different kind of requirement in terms of candidates. So there's a very broad range of opportunities that typically emerge. Usually it's dependent on funding. If someone has a specific program or a specific research project they have a real motivation about, it may be a case of bringing that to the most appropriate member of the faculty and seeing if there are funding opportunities that may emerge that they could make an application for under some mentoring of the member staff.
Thanks, Owen. And I think if Laura could just pop into the webinar chat as well, we have a link on UCD which kind of outlines the steps in applying and hopefully securing a PhD position within UCD. Just one final question. One of our attendees has followed up that they were wondering while studying Oliver Kinnane's Masters, which is the MSc in Architecture, Urbanism and Climate Action, would it be possible to continue working? And I'm assuming by that they mean in a professional capacity, not a part-time job.
I suppose it's kind of difficult for us to answer that.
I think your broadband is just making you
a full-time job with education. Okay, can you hear me now?
You're back now. Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose it's not something we'd recommend, but and of course it will very much depend on the modules that the student takes. So a number of the core modules, yes, you know, lectures will be recorded and available online, but a number of the options modules might not offer the same opportunity. So certainly it would very much restrict the student's choice, I think, within the program. But it may be possible, but we would certainly not recommend it. It's very difficult for a student to do full-time study and full-time work at the same time.
I think this is a full-time program. UCD does offer a number of part-time programs, but I think when it's a full-time program and you're trying to maintain a career at the same time, it's just it makes it quite impossible to do so, and that the attention should really be on a full-time program, would be my understanding.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So I think that's completed all our questions, which brings our webinar to a conclusion for today. I'd like to sincerely thank our academics, Arthur, Eoin and Oliver, for giving their time so generously, and also to our student and very recent graduate, Hugh and Alana, and my colleague in the marketing department, Laura, for your time. Very much appreciated, and thank you very much.